All right, in this video, we're gonna go over common mistakes with the leg extension setup, where you may be going wrong, and then maybe where you can optimize things if you're already doing things well. So first things first, I have this Kaiser leg extension, which has a couple interesting features. The first is that it moves one leg at a time, but the second is that it has a pad that doesn't adjust up to down. So pretty cool, and also really not cool at the same time, but we'll just kind of ignore that for now and go over the general principles. First things first, when you sit down, a lot of people naturally, as you can see the way that I'm sitting, will be bowed out a little bit, right? Most people don't have hips, or at least very few, that are hypertrophied sit like this, where their legs are really just naturally this way. And even the people that are more narrow still need to make adjustments. So keep in mind that your knee is a hinge joint. It's only gonna move in one direction, right? Even if you move your leg out here, that's your hip moving, it's not your knee moving. Your knee moving is just this, whether it's here or whether it's over here, same motion, and we wanna load the knee in one direction because it is a hinge structurally. So when we set up to the leg extension, we want to make sure that we actually roll the legs inward. Now for you, if that means rolling both at the same time or one at a time and doing it single leg, doesn't really matter, just as long as the knee relative to the pad is lined up straight. So for me, again, naturally, if I just sit here comfortably, my knee actually wants to do this. So what I know that I need to do is I actually need to take my knee and almost sit like sort of this way in the seat, in the case of this seat, so that, and again, before I put my leg into the pad, I'm gonna sort of assess this. Can I move my leg in the direction that the machine wants to move? In this case, yes. So that when I get in there, I'm moving in that same direction, right? If I don't do that and I'm not intentional about that, what's gonna happen is my knee is gonna naturally float this way. And then as I get into that leg extension, even though the pad is moving this way, my knee is sort of going this way, right? So, imagine that like I'm in here, but my knee wants to do this. That's no good for the knee because now it's gonna be loaded sort of where this space on this side of the knee is getting separated, right? Joint separation force. No bueno. Okay, so first things first, roll the leg in. So you see that, and this is sort of the marker that I like to use, is the patella, right? So this big sort of sesamoid bone on the front of the knee, people call it the kneecap, as well as this tibial tuberosity, which is just this pointy prominence on the top. You could literally feel these two and just be like, okay, are they facing the direction that the pad is moving? So for me, I get in there, I say, okay, kneecap, tibial tube, boom, bing, ba, boom, in there. What you'll notice also is that you may have differences between sides. So if I'm doing this two legs at the same time and I get in there with both legs and I sort of roll my knees in, I may notice that one of them, one of the legs, in my case, my left leg actually needs to be rotated a little bit more inward, just based on sort of how my legs naturally are. Your legs will be a little bit asymmetrical. That's totally fine. They've lived a different life from one another. Don't expect them to be the same. And so when you come up and in, if you do it with two legs, what you'll notice is that you may again have to do the rotation slightly differently. But for me, it's just again, kneecap, front of that tibia. Are they pointing in that direction that I want them to be pointing in? And other than that, that's pretty much all you really need to know. Now, other things to keep in mind, pay attention to, again, as I mentioned, this pad is not one that rolls up or down. Ideally, you have the pad sort of on the bottom third of the tibia and not on the foot. A lot of times with this machine, what I'll have to do is slide my knee forward a little bit so that pad can roll here. And even though it does roll a little bit toward the bottom, toward my foot, it stays basically in that same spot as long as you make an adjustment around the pad. Obviously, 99.9% of leg extensions have the adjustable pad, so make sure that it's on the bottom third of the tibia and not sitting on top of the foot, so that you can actually dorsiflex or just pull your toe up very, very slightly, or just leave it in neutral, whatever is more comfortable, stable, force producing, able for you. The other thing is that a lot of people talk about lining the knee up with the axis of the machine, right? So they say, okay, make sure that the inside of your knee is really lined well with this. But if, as you can see, if I do that with this machine, the pad ends up a little bit too low. So that's not a hard and fast rule. What I like to say is, okay, make sure that you have that shin and that kneecap pointed in the correct forward direction, whether it's single leg or two leg. Number one, that's the priority. And then number two is like, okay, where is the pad sitting? Because if the pad is here comfortably and it's perfect, it really doesn't matter too much outside of a few circumstances at the extremes that your knee is perfectly lined up with the axis. So the whole lining the knee up with the axis of rotation in the machine, it's like a very cool soundbite and it sounds cool, but don't worry about it really as your first priority. Worry about the position of the knee, however you need to move your hip to do that, and then worry about where the pad is on the shin, because pretty much everything after that will just sort of follow. So for instance, where should the back seat be? The back seat should be basically wherever it needs to be for you to line up your knee and your shin in the positions that I've just mentioned and talked about. And the reason that we want those things in those places is not only for the orthopedic health and the safety of the knee, but also just general output and strength and adding load over time. What I found is if either of those two things are sort of out of whack, people either get pain or they're just limited in output in some significant way over, not even a very long period of time, only a couple weeks there where they're not able to progress. And then I see the adjustments that are made very easily, and then things take off from there. So if you have any questions about the leg extension that I didn't already answer in this video, please drop them below. Hopefully those tips were helpful.